Hello, Ellen. Welcome
Hello.
to the Good Mood Podcast. So you are one of my supervisors when I was an intern and also a teacher of various courses.
I feel very old all of a sudden.
Well, yeah, like I have these Facebook reminders that, like how like Facebook memories,
Yeah.
I guess. And it was
Yeah.
like from 2011 and I'm making like jokes about being in school, like about how like, I don't know, Prince William is getting married and I'm writing exams, and I'm like, whoa, this was almost 10 years ago, 2011. I was in second year or first year.
2011. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
9 years ago.
I know. I guess I've been in practice for a few years, but then school also lasts like a decade. So it's like, yeah, you're like, yeah, 2011. Oh man, that's crazy.
You know what? I feel like 2020 makes the math a little bit hard to do. I don't know why. Sometimes 20, and then I like think 2009 and 2019 I get a bit confused. I'm like, wait.
Right. Yeah, like 2009, that was just last year.
Yeah, right, exactly. Wait, no, it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, there was like a meme that was like 1980. What did they say? They were like it's so weird because like the year 2000 was 20 years ago, but so was 1980. I'm like, I know.
It's weird. Very weird.
I know.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
It has been a really long time. That also makes me feel like I've been at the college for, like, it's making me realize like I graduated in 2009.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I've been
last
there.
year.
Yeah. So I've been there, yeah, like 11 years.
You're still at the college? So at the
Mm-hmm.
Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine?
Yeah, I'm still there.
Supervisor.
Yeah, definitely my role has changed since I taught you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Since we had our so for the audience members, Ellen was and it's hard to call you Ellen and not Dr. Wong.
It's very weird. A mutual friend of ours also mentioned the other day, I think it's really weird that I'm calling you Ellen. I'm like, really? Because we are long past the student day.
I know, it's so funny, right? Because it's like, yeah, you're all going to be like on a first name basis eventually, so might as well start, but
yeah,
it's good to have respect. I can still call you Dr. Wong if you want.
No, please don't. Actually, that's very awkward.
And so I think we were like Saturday shift, which was a very good shift. And so yeah, we would do like, we'd see patients, then we do like preview, which was like gathering together and sharing cases and review, and going over our like board exam practice questions, which was amazing. Yeah. Good
Saturdays, I eventually stopped just because I was working 6 days a week and it was just absolutely insane after a while. But Saturdays were always my favorite days. It just felt very different. You know, the college felt different. The clinic felt a little bit different. It just felt a little bit more easygoing. I don't know. It was just the intensity of Monday to Friday and everybody being there. But I felt like Saturday shifts were always my favorite shifts.
Yeah, it feels like I've continued to work Saturdays throughout my whole career. Like I mean, today I'm seeing patients too, and it just feels so different. Yeah, even if you finish at 3:00, you're like, yeah, I have the whole weekend.
Yeah.
And having a day off is pretty awesome because, you know, like it's nice to have time off when the rest of the world's working. It's a cool thing. So
that is true. That is true.
And so you have narrowed your focus or started to focus on happiness and joy. And you have a company or a brand called the Joy Avenue.
Yeah.
Why did you start to focus on happiness? And I guess mine is the Good Mood, whatever project, podcast. So we're kind of doing the same thing. Good mood, joy, happiness. Yeah. And so why did you decide to focus on happiness and joy?
So my own kind of quick personal story reason. Actually, the professional one's a little bit more straightforward. Maybe I'll start with that. Yeah. But I, like as a naturopathic doctor, we often see a lot of different types of conditions that kind of come in through our door. And back when I had a more general practice, again, like lots of things that I'm sure you see a lot of kind of, digestion, chronic pain, chronic diseases, like, illnesses, aches and pains, and then, digestion and mood obviously being a huge one. And I remember kind of just starting to realize this pattern, because I would always ask people, what's the motivation? Like, what is the driving factor for you to come in here and make this change? Because I'm going to be very honest for anybody who's listening and isn't super familiar or is familiar with naturopathic medicine. It's just that the way we approach things is, it tends to be more of a like a change, like it's a lifestyle change, a mental change, or like there's always like a bit, it's a little bit more in depth and long lasting than what we could call quote unquote a quick fix. And it's not to say that you can't ever use quick fixes, or they don't have like a place for them. Sometimes, sometimes you have a headache and sometimes you take an Advil, right? But then if you have a chronic headache, now is your approach, is your personal philosophy around that to take an Advil every time? And if it is, good for you, and that's great, it works for you. Some people don't want that as a solution. And so I think when you start to go down this path where you're asking people to make like maybe like a lifestyle change or shifting the way they approach something, I always found asking the motivation behind making this change really helped the whole process. And so I often would ask people, why are you interested in doing it this way? Why is it important for you to make this change? And very, very often, if we distilled it down, people wanted to feel good and feel happy. And it almost didn't matter which condition they came in. It always came down to that. And or like themes around it, like happy, carefree, feel more free, want to enjoy my life more. I want to do the things I want to do. And why do you want to do that? Because it makes me happy. It makes the people around me happy. So that was kind of my professional thing that kind of led me down there. Personally, long history of high functioning anxiety, and depression, and it just, which one was higher was just a matter of like where I was in that cycle. And I tried a lot of the things that we have access to, whether it's kind of pharmaceutical medications. I had several rounds of that, and I gave it a try. And I definitely used a lot of naturopathic things as well, whether it's diet, supplements, all that kind of stuff. And to me, what I eventually, and it got quite bad, like my anxiety drove me into burnout because, and again, it's kind of funny sharing this because I know I worked with you at the college, but a lot of people would say that I was really hardworking, performed really, really well, had a really high output, and had great work ethics. Like all of these things, I know people said around me because that's why I got the opportunities that I got. And the kind of kicker around that is that people saw that about me, but inside, I knew that I pushed this hard, I worked this hard, I performed this well because I was really anxious about what I was doing. And I was really anxious about what people thought about me, how people perceived me. And my coping mechanism was to work harder, was to make sure everything I did came out as well as people expected it to come from me. So when people told me I had a good work ethic, I always felt a little bit kind of like, ugh, because it wasn't really driven by a good work ethic. It was driven by being anxious about what I was doing. I just hid it really well in the package that I presented, kind of. And so that drove me into burnout several times. And then the burnout would inevitably kick in the depression, because then I wasn't functioning as well. I was worried about how people would see that I was slower or any of those things. And so the anxiety led to the burnout. I was hospitalized. I had panic attacks. I've been very close to hurting myself from depression. And so kind of all of these things made me try all the different possibilities of options. And I'm not saying none of them like they all helped. They all helped a little bit. And the way I always describe it is that all of these things helped me go from negative to neutral. Everything kind of neutralized it. How it made me feel when things were neutral were different. I didn't necessarily love how my brain and my mood functioned when I was on pharmaceuticals, and I experienced a whole slew of other side effects that I found really difficult for me to handle. With the naturopathic stuff, again, like it definitely worked. It definitely brought me back to that neutral position where I felt good enough to kind of, like do the things I wanted to do. But slowly I realized that neutral isn't where I want to be. And in order for me to go from neutral to positive or neutral to happy, I really, really needed to work on the way I think, because my thoughts ultimately was what determined how I felt. And you can't eat your way into thinking a different thought. You can't take a supplement to change how you think. You can't take a pharmaceutical to change how you think. And I don't really have a lot of proof around this, but my feeling as to why sometimes those people realize or feel like those things don't work for them is because you can, I guess, the feeling and the thought weren't aligned. And that always triggers like a discomfort in people if you're feeling a certain way and your thoughts are telling you a different thing. So you can maybe you take enough, whatever it is, make enough changes, and you feel okay, and you're trying to tell yourself that you're being positive, or your thoughts are still negative, and it's just not aligned. It doesn't really matter how they're not aligned, but they're not aligned, and it makes people feel off and uncomfortable, and they fall off the bandwagon, whatever that treatment protocol or management plan is they're on. And over time, I started to realize just how important it is to work on your thoughts and what that, and I still obviously treat patients and I still use all my tools, but that's one component of it. And then I started realizing, everybody wanted to, everybody that I've spoken to, all of these patients and whatever, they ultimately want to feel happiness. When I was going through everything I was going through, I would have given anything to feel happy. And I couldn't. And it's not like I watched a funny movie and I laughed, because I could still do that, but it was just like deep down, that core sense of peace and like happiness and that kind of vibrant feeling, being excited for things in life, not even just because something big was happening. I could just be excited, like, what you were sharing with me, just getting up and being like, oh, today I might get to go surfing. Like that kind of, I couldn't feel it. And I desperately wanted to feel that. And it led me to go down this really big, long path of looking into what happiness meant. And then I started feeling better. I definitely did a lot of like the mindfulness, meditation, like a whole bunch of different things. And I was definitely starting to feel better. The anxiety was better controlled, and the depression wasn't really there anymore. So I was just kind of left with the anxiety and the overthinking part of it still. And met my then boyfriend, got married. We were deciding where we wanted to go on our honeymoon, and he had been kind of paying attention to me sharing all the stuff and what I was doing, and he actually suggested that he's like, why don't we go visit the happiest place on earth during our honeymoon? And I swear to goodness that I thought we were going to Disney World.
That's amazing.
Because that's the happiest place on earth. But he was actually
Mickey loves rich people more than poor people. That he makes that very apparent.
And so I really thought that's where we're going. And then he kind of just said to me, he's like, no, like and then he started talking about like flying, to the mountains. And I was like, Disney World is not in the mountains. Like, where are we going? And then there, there's technically mountains. There's like that Magic Kingdom. There's like Epcot. I don't know. One of them has a mountain. It was Space Mountain. It was not Space Mountain. Right. We were not flying.
Yeah, you're like, are we flying to just plastic mountains?
Yeah, we're not doing that. So he introduced me to this country called Bhutan, and it's known as one of the happiest places on earth, or they definitely, I don't know, there's like different ranking lists about happiest places on earth. Either way, what drew me to Bhutan is their philosophy around happiness, which is absolutely fascinating for me. And so they, instead of running a census on the population, like I don't know. I don't remember the last time we had to fill in a census form, but it, like how old are you? What do you do? Like, like the typical kind of whatever. They run something called the Gross National Happiness Index. So their census, which again is like it's so awesome that their government runs this index, that's their census, and they measure the things that make people happy, and then they take that and make governmental policies to ensure the happiness of people in their nation. And it's not like I I've really read into this, and it's not like this willy-nilly thing that they decided to just throw some questions together. Like they hired statisticians from around the world. They really looked into like people who've studied happiness. They really wanted to capture what it was that made people happy. And when I've shared the story, I'm sure you know there's lots of people who like to pick apart people's stories, like naysayers. And I honestly read so much about Bhutan before I went, and even more when I came back from our honeymoon. But there's been a lot of political concerns. There's been a lot of things that I don't necessarily agree with how things got, the way they are. And I guess my whole philosophy around that is that I don't think there's a single country in the world that hasn't had interesting decisions that may not have been the best. I don't think there's a single country in the world that doesn't necessarily have some kind of bias, maybe even racism, and I'm not saying Bhutan is racist. I'm just saying like every country has its thing that they're struggling with. I think it's inherent. But what I applaud them for is trying. Like they're taking a stance to try and do something that is, I don't think anybody else in the world is doing. Like their happiness index measures things aside from the typical kind of health education stuff like that. They measure psychological well-being. They measure, do you have a sense of community? Do you feel like your community is there to support you? They measure how much you feel you have control over your use of time, because they recognize that people who feel that they have control in how they spend their time feel happier, right? And it's like, and they realized how much nature plays a role in people's happiness, and we know that like spending time in nature means that you have a better, but then they also recognize it's not just about then planting trees, it's about protecting their ecological diversity. And so they are, I think, still the only carbon negative country in the world. They, I think, are on their way. I think their pledge was 2025 or something like that, to be the only country in the world where everything is produced organically.
Wow.
And like, I just feel like, yes, they're a small country. Yes, they're kind of like in their own little bubble, really. They're like in the depths of the Himalayan mountains. Like I get all of that, but I still think that it's very easy for a country like that to also flip the switch and be like, let's grow economically so that we catch up with wherever everybody else is measuring it and how everyone is measuring it. But they chose not to. They said, no, like it's important for us to maintain this environment for our population so that they are happy. And so again, like when you visit, like they're very not strict, but they're very like, when you visit, like we want to show you how we live. So it's not like you kind of just meander around and get on an Uber and like go do your own thing. Like they're very adamant about like making sure that when you go, like you respect what they want from you, because they really, really, truly, like they're open to tourism. They get that it brings them money, but they're also like not at the expense of what we think is important for our population. And so very, very long story, but it was a very kind of a turning point for me when I realized what true happiness really meant and what it could mean for an entire country, an entire population. And so I came back from my honeymoon and then really, really started focusing on how we can increase the feelings of happiness for ourselves and everyone around us. Because I am very very, how would I describe this? I have a very strong belief that if we all understood happiness the way it's meant to be understood, and if we kind of integrated happiness the way it's meant to be integrated, then I think this world would be a much, much kinder and safer and a more beautiful place for everybody to be in.
Which would cause more happiness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that, I know you asked me one question and I went on for
No, this is great. What was the vibe like when you visited Bhutan? Like, did you feel that people were happier? Like, did it feel like that? I'm just curious. Like, what was it like on the ground?
Yeah, that's what really great question. I actually, that was one of the things that I was maybe again a little skeptical before I went. I was like, well, it's nice that they say the government is doing this. Like, are they actually playing out?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll share a couple of examples. To answer your question, quickly, is very chill, very, very chill. But to give you some examples, I really wish I took a picture of this and I couldn't, but their road signs are written with humor. Like they're so, like Bhutan is in the Himalayan mountains and there's a lot of roads that are literally just kind of hugging the mountainside.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's, I really wish I asked the driver to stop and let me take a picture, but there's road signs that are literally like slow down, stay alive. Like they're just kind of like very like kind of cheeky little funny ways of saying things. But so like to give you an example, when we went, there was a like a snowfall, and like it's not the Canadian snowfall. Like there's a little bit of snow hovering on the floor, right? Like that's what,
like a sprinkle.
like it's just like the little sprinkle. Like we're not like Canadian snowstorm. But because they're in the mountains, it is obviously extremely dangerous to drive along the side of the mountain road, even if there is a little bit of snow on the floor. And they don't have railings. Like, I guess it's just not practical to kind of put railings around their entire country because that's literally how all their roads are. So to protect the safety of their people, the first snowfall of the year, where there is snow on the floor and people are just adjusting, the entire city shuts down for a day. It doesn't matter what project they're running on. It doesn't matter if their building is not going to be built on time. Like it doesn't, like nothing matters. The city automatically the whole country shuts down for a day, because the safety of their people is more important to them than meeting the deadline to build the building, to do whatever. So the city shuts down for a day. And the cool thing about the city shutting down for the day is that people are not all going into the houses and watching TV or like what, like I don't know, like cuddled inside and not doing it. The amount of adults and children that were automatically on the street trying to throw snowballs at each other and playing was literally a joy to watch. Like, I don't remember the last time I have seen that many adults who aren't at a ski resort or whatever, like out there throwing snowballs, trying to like, build snowmen. And they were into it. Like, it wasn't like a fun, haha, I'm just tossing some snow. Like, people were running into the house and bringing out umbrellas to like be shields. Like, they were full on playing. And it wasn't coordinated. It wasn't like it wasn't as if I called my best friend and let's go build a fort in my house. Like, they were just on the street playing. So like the tourism didn't stop, obviously, because we were there as guests, so they were trying to take us to the temples and do whatever. And like my tour guide would like roll down his window and like shout out at his friend because he recognized somebody on the street, and then that person would try to quickly, like we're at a stoplight or whatever, and they're like trying to quickly throw a snowball through the window to catch to see if they can get his face. Like, this is literally how the whole day went. And I just kind of sat there. I remember thinking, like, I could imagine how in a society like ours, where we're very goal driven, and it's not that that's a bad thing, but it's just the way our thinking is. Like, somebody could be like, oh, this is very unprofessional. Like, I am a paying customer and I am on a tour and you're playing around. And I could see that. Like, I could see how like we could get so caught up in the way we think that we would feel that. But I just remember being like, I don't think I've seen this many adults have this much fun, like so carefree. And
Awesome.
obviously it's not like they just put on a show for us. Like the whole city, like I'm watching us driving by and there's like kids and adults, like everybody throwing snowballs and having fun. And we would get to this little cultural village, and like I would just kind of be listening to the guide and watch this corner where people are literally trying to shove snowballs down people's shirts because they thought that was hilarious. And like, I mean, obviously they didn't do that to the woman. So then they would go and try to like put snow in her hair, and like they were just having so much fun. And I was like they must be really happy. On some level, I'm sure they all have their problems. And I'm like, again, it's not like the country doesn't have any problems. It's not like the country doesn't have any issues they're dealing with, but to like witness that, they must be feeling super happy and carefree, right? And like, can I give you another example?
Yeah, I was just gonna say though, like I was like, yeah, if I was president of the world and they were like, okay, one of the things you need to care about is like happiness, I'd be like, mandatory snow days for everyone. That would be not like one of the things. Yeah.
Like it's just
like it makes sense.
It kind of does, right? Like it's just, and so when we go, you're again, they don't have public transport, they don't have Uber, they don't have subways. Like this is just also, I don't know how you build a subway in the middle of the Himalayan mountains, but like it's just like that's just not how they. So when you go, again, they're very very protective of their ecological surroundings, and you know, so when you go, you are assigned a tour guide and a driver, and they just kind of hang out with you, and you can ask them you want to see different things and they'll try to figure it out, but they want to showcase like their temples that are built inside mountains, and they want to showcase like, so, and again, like to me, like if I'm choosing to go there, I have to respect that. Like I have to respect that that's what they're asking of us as a visitor. And so we got this itinerary, and on the very bottom, they're kind of explaining to you, like, yes, your tour guide will be with you. Yes, your driver will be with you. But then there was this one line, this little paragraph that just kind of alluded to the fact that, you know, people in Bhutan view their job very differently than people outside of Bhutan. And they see it as something to enjoy, something that kind of fuels them, as opposed to something that just simply makes them money. And so we believe, like along the lines of like, we believe that to like kind of support them if something happens in their family where they feel like it's important for them to attend, another member of their tour agency will come in and step in and take over for that afternoon. It was like along in those lines, and it wasn't anything big like a marriage or like a funeral. Like it wasn't like that. It could literally be that their child has a birthday party and they think it's really important for them to attend that, and they're so used to working as a community that tour agency, and it's not just one, there's several tour agencies that you can join, but like they just, the government supports this. Like the government of Bhutan supports that if you think there's something important for you to go do that is important for you and your community, then other people in your community are going to help come in and help out. So if your tour guide has a birthday to attend, he will go and attend that birthday, and like some other member of their team is going to come in and take care of you. Like we'll make sure you're taken care of, but it's important for them to go do the things that they think are important. And I just kind of again looked at that, like I don't, self-employed people may be a bit more flexible, but I don't think there's very many salary positions where it's that easy to just be like, I'm like, my child has a birthday party, I'm gonna go, and then somebody else just be like, absolutely, let me take over your job for you.
Totally. Yeah.
Like I don't think it's not like that, and even in tour agencies in Canada, I don't think is like that at all. And like to them, it was just completely normal. It was just, that's just what they have to do. Like, but again, like these are tour agencies that are organized and kind of regulated by the government, which means the government is agreeing that this is a thing that you should do and that it's important that you do. And again, like this, can you imagine if that's how you worked? That's the environment you worked in was such that if you felt like it was important to you, you didn't have to explain it. That is okay. Someone else is going to come in and just take over, and that's okay. Like it's fine. It's normal. It's expected. That's how you should live your life. Like I don't know. Like to me, like I don't think there's very many workplaces that have that sense of community that are able to foster that. I don't think our government would necessarily agree with that or like make that a policy, right? So
Like even taking sick leave, like some of my patients express concern when they're like, should I take another day of sick leave? I feel like I need to keep recovering, but I feel bad about throwing my other coworkers under the bus. But imagine if it's like, hey, Ellen, why are you working Saturday or Sunday? You're like, oh, well, because, Joseph's got his kid's birthday. I'm like, oh, cool. Good for him. All right.
Yeah. And it was just the thing. It was just be like, oh, I'm going in on Saturday because someone else needs to go do something that's important to them. You know what I mean? And then knowing that on the flip side, if I had to go do something, somebody would easily step in for me. That's just because that's the culture. Like, that's how they think. You're not, like, if I asked you to be like, oh, Talia, like, I have to go do something on Saturday, can you step in for me? Like, I'm not asking you this humongous favor and like, I have to feel bad about it because that is the culture. The culture is that you step in and help each other out. And that is just how you function. And obviously it also means that, I suppose, that it, like, down to the technicalities, like, everybody's cross-trained and you, like, I know you can come in, I'm not asking you to do something really difficult and vice versa. Like, you know what I mean? And I just feel like they really truly stand behind what they're trying to do, right? Like support the people and give them that sense of community. And I just thought, like, it's,
and there's like
it was just so eye-opening to see.
There's also sounds like there's this like aura of accountability where it's like, I'll take on your shift so that you can enjoy your son's birthday. And then, when my son has a birthday, I'll be able to enjoy that, or when something important to me comes up. So our work shifts are flexible. But even the road signs, it's like, instead of just like drive slow, like this very authoritative, like authoritarian thing, it's like drive slow, stay alive. Like that's
like, it's kind of cheeky. Like, I really wish I took some pictures of them, but it was really funny. Like, they were just like kind of cheeky looking, kind of, anyways. And again, like, setup is very different. Like, they have a monarchy, but the way their monarchy work is they have, like, he has like a right hand, left hand man, and one is a spiritual leader and one is a governmental leader. And whenever they make any big decisions that affect their country and the people there, everybody has to sit down. Like, the spiritual leader and the political government leader, they all, and the monarch, they all have to sit down and like agree to it together, so that is all captured as well and taken care of. And they are a Buddhist country, so maybe because there's one main religion, it's a little bit easier to do that, I would assume. But again, like, I feel like it's nice that I take that into consideration. Like, it's not just about, GDP and measuring the growth of our economy. It's also about, well, are we taking care of the people who live here from a spiritual perspective? And it doesn't, spirituality, religion, like, but it's a mental health being. Like, that's how I kind of saw the way they approached it. And that's really nice, like, to remember that part of it. And it's not just about how much money we're making and contributing. Like, that's obviously important. They obviously opened it up to tourism because it will bring them money, but they're also really trying to balance it with they also, I was reading about this afterwards because I was asking them about like women tour guides, because I saw a lot of male tour guides and I didn't see a lot of female ones. And our tour guide was explaining to me how they recognize that it's difficult for women sometimes to become tour guides, and that there was a disparity between how many women versus how many men, and that their government was now actively trying to put regulations in place that would make it easier for women to return to work after childbirth and make pay equal as much. Like, they're trying to like get these things in place so that he was giving me a couple of examples of how like they were trying to make it easier for women to return back to the work field and make sure that they move it into achieve equality. Like, they recognized that it was a slow thing and that there was lots of things that they needed to change about it. But that's how. And even their monarchy was different. Like, apparently their prince doesn't sit in some like castle somewhere. They don't interact. Like, he wanders the street apparently, and he just plays basketball with kids if he sees. Like, it's not like a ooh, there's 17 bodyguards around me because I'm a monarch. Like, apparently they don't really do that. So they just, I don't even remember if they talked about bodyguards, but like, they're like, yeah, like, if we see him, we'll point him out to you. And I was like, he's just like out on a tour. Like, what? And they're like, no, sometimes he sees like kids in the schoolyard and he plays basketball with them or like whatever. Like, he's like it's not like what he said. I literally, when he said that, I was like, oh, like, is he going to be on a tour of the country? Is that why, like, if we see him, like, we'll point him out? And they're like, no, like, he literally will just walk down the side of the street. Like, it's not.
That's so cool.
It's not a thing. And I was like, like it just every time like I would ask a question kind of expecting a particular thing, they would say something and I'd be like, whoa, that's different.
Like there's the prince right there. He's just
Yeah,
playing like street basketball. You're like, what?
basically, literally, that's kind of what they do. Like they do that, and apparently, like they're obviously they're the monarchy, so they still live in a very nice place, obviously. But then apparently, like when they make a lot of money, instead of putting it back into renovating their palace or whatever, they put the money back into like funding education for people and like whatever. And I'm just like, I just even like even if they're not doing it perfectly, and I don't assume that they are, but even if they're not, I feel like again, I applaud someone who is taking a stance for all of this and trying.
And it's so different from how we live. It's so interesting, right? You're like, so even if it's not I mean, no human being is perfect. Like even the happiest person on earth has some shadow element. So there's a shadow element to Bhutan, I'm sure, but it's so interesting to see how differently they could live, like how different their mindset could be around work, around signage.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny, like, because it's almost like maximizing the prince's happiness. Like I lived in Colombia, and one of my English students, I was an English teacher, one of my students was the wife of the conservative leader, like the conservative party leader. So she's like, and she worked for like, she was like a trader at Citibank, and she would like walk around with bodyguards, like go out in armored cars, like, and I remember thinking, like, you live almost in a gilded cage. Like you can't go for walks on the street because you're scared of being murdered or whatever, kidnapped, robbed. You can't just like go for a jog. Like you have to, everything has to be sort of arranged. And the prince probably is like, I just want to play basketball and go for a walk. I don't want to create this thing around myself. It's not fun.
Yeah. And I remember how they told us that the they don't have their, like the monarchy doesn't have their own plane or their whatever, like they have their own car obviously, but like they don't have like this special whatever. They fly the same plane that we flew in Bhutan in, and like they just they sit in first class, so fine. but like they're just like, it is I think on our way out of Bhutan, they actually officially said like, we're welcoming I think it was like the queen mother or like somebody, like they're just like, oh, we just want to welcome, whoever. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, but it's just, I don't know, like to me, it gave me a glimpse of what life could be like what living with happiness and like a collective joy in the community, what that felt like. That really, again, I don't pretend they're perfect. I know there's lots of concerns and issues and all that kind of stuff, but it gave me a sense of what was possible, even if we tried to be some of that or implement some of that, right?
Yeah, it's like a permission to have fun, to act like a kid, to put your life first, your personal life first over work. It's like this like deep sort of sense of deserving to be happy. Like I'm sensing that in their culture. Like I think a lot of us feel a lot of shame around taking time off, not prioritizing work, like wanting to be, I mean, I had this revelation because, with COVID and these lockdowns, a lot of people working from home, our work has shifted. And I've been feeling that because work doesn't feel so much like a slog anymore. But I was like all of a sudden feeling super guilty about that, because I was like, what does it mean I was having all these like thoughts, like, what does it mean to work hard? And for a lot of us, and me included, working hard has been, it means like a slog, a struggle, a hustle, if you're not in that state, if you're just contributing, but you don't have that like that sweat and grindstone kind of thing, then it feels like, am I allowed to like make a living and not be super stressed all the time?
Yes. And somehow, like I say this a lot, but we wear busyness as a badge of honor. Like it's like there's something wrong with you if you do not feel like you need to be hustling and grinding and like, super ambitious. And I'm not saying like you have to be like it's wrong to be ambitious, but I think our mindset around ambition is often one of that, like like what's wrong with you if you're not, kind of, and like you ought to be doing these things, and I think that's one of how and I think there's nothing wrong with being I would consider myself an ambitious person. Like I have goals that I want to achieve. I have things that I want to do. I have dreams I want to, have come to fruition. But this is really how when I built Joy Avenue, why our mission became to help ambitious women prioritize their happiness as much as their success. Because to me, success without happiness isn't a win. It really isn't. I've seen enough and treated enough people who, by all check marks and checklists, are very successful people, and they are not happy. And I've realized that that's, to me, it's not a win. It's not a win to be successful and feel miserable.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, we want to get rid of our migraines, and at the foundation, because we want to be happy, and migraines don't make us happy. They prevent us from being happy. But similarly, we want to achieve things probably because ultimately we want happiness. So if it's not the way to get there, if it's just making us less happy, it's defeating the purpose. You're like, so I've achieved all my career goals, but I'm miserable. It's not, doesn't seem like a win. You're right. Yeah.
So like, to me, that was one. So when I keep saying we, really right now, Joy Avenue is me and someone helping me, but like,
and I said that too. I was like, we is literally me for a good
I was like, me and one other person helping me. A lot of building out what would be part of Joy Avenue was to really keep that in mind. Like, is this going to contribute to helping someone not only achieve success, however they define that to be, but also, are we going to remember to feel happiness and feel joy around it? And I actually looked up the definition of joy to me, because I was kind of like, I had a branding manager help me kind of put this all together and like help me really stay focused. So one of my biggest problems is that I kind of like deviate this way. I'm like, oh, look at this, and I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about that, and like I build a program for this, and I build a program for, you know what I mean? Like, you just kind of got to this thing, and she's just like, no, like, zone in. What, like the one thing that we're really going to focus on, and then you can choose and you can adapt your programs, like whatever it is, but like they have to fit this thing. So we named it Joy Avenue, which I thought was such a cute, like lovely little name. So I was looking into well, I was like, I've always talked about happiness. So where does this joy popping in from? Like, Happy Avenue sounded different. Joy Avenue sounded better. So
taking a stroll on Joy Avenue.
Yeah, exactly. So we, like, I looked into it, and so the definition of joy is actually that it's an emotion that is evoked by feelings of happiness, well-being, and success. And I was like, yes, that's what I want. Like, I want, and I think other people want that feeling, right? Like to know that you are well, to know that you are happy, and to know that you are successful, however you define that to be for yourself. And I'm like, that is it. That is what I want everyone to be able to feel every day of their life. And it's not delusional. Like, I do find, toxic positivity to be a very problematic thing. Like, it's not to say that like you said, the happiest person on earth isn't happy every single, that's delusional. Like, it's borderlining delusional, right? Like, that's not what we're aiming for. But to me, like, joy is something you can tap into. Like, it's almost like a reserve, like a battery bank you build up. And when life's stressors and crappy things happen, because it does, like, it's out of your control, you get to like tap back into that little reserve that you have, and draw from it. And you know how to replenish that reserve, right? It's kind of like charging a phone battery, right?
Yeah, it's like the happiest person on earth like stubs their toe and they're like, ah! But then the pain wears off and they're like, okay, let's vacuum.
Yeah, because I think they have the reserve, right? Like, they have that thing that they can draw upon. They have things set up in their life that allows them to draw upon that, to help them replenish that feeling. So yeah, it's
and like a baseline level of like contentedness too. Like
Yes.
I don't think it's always like euphoria, but there's just like a baseline, like, yeah. And I also think like I always have this image of like waking up feeling really good about being in your life.
Yes.
Like that feeling in the morning
Yes.
where you're like excited to be alive. Like I've definitely had those moments where I wake up and I'm like, oh no. Like, you know,
Yeah.
with especially like during a period of grieving,
Yeah.
you wake
Yeah.
up and you're like, I'm back here
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And a lot of people with depression feel like that, right? Like,
Yeah.
or the dread in the morning. But to wake up and be like, yes, I'm gonna like see patients, dog
Mm-hmm.
walk, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Like all the simple things, right?
Mhm.
And it's so easy to tell somebody, oh, like enjoy the simple things in life. But if you're not there, whether, you know, because there's a mental condition or because your mindset needs to adapt or whatever it is, like it's, you can't just tell someone to like go
Mhm.
enjoy the little things, right? You really do have to like work on that. Like there is like a,
Yeah.
yeah, there is like a level of contentedness, exactly what you said, that allows you to enjoy the little things. And
Yeah.
it's a matter of helping people get there,
Yeah. Because
right?
if you just tell someone like, just, well, I'm probably guilty of this with some patients, and sorry if this is you that's listening, but like go for a dog walk. And then it's like, but that's where positivity becomes toxic, where you're sort of bypassing whatever's the
Mm-hmm.
connections that need to occur, maybe the grieving, maybe the actual pain that needs to happen, to just
Mm-hmm.
like instill this fake positivity. It's not coming from that deep
Mm-hmm.
well of joy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Yeah.
just kind of like, okay, I'm fine. Like I have a magnet on my fridge, and it's like this medieval painting, and the girl has a sword in her neck, and it just says like, I'm fine. It's like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and I definitely tell people to go for walks too, right? This is not, and it's not that, you know, when you say that, it's patience of Talia, she's still giving you good advice.
Yeah, still go for walks.
Yeah,
Try
still
and
go
be
for walks,
happy.
because
Yeah.
it's both, right? Like it's a matter of doing those little things because because you need to, like you actually do need to cut the cycle, changing your mindset, resetting your biochemistry, working on the hormones, the neurotransmitters, the chemicals. Like that's not going to happen overnight either, right? So it is a multi-pronged approach. And yes, you do need to go out for walks. Yes, you do need to like be in nature, spend time with people that make you happy. You do need to watch a happy movie, you know, and laugh and do all of those things. But if you want a deeper, longer lasting transformation, then you do have to dig in and work on the other stuff.
Like put your body, I should, yeah, that Cheryl Strayed quote, the author of Wild, it's like put yourself in the way of beauty. It's like you may not feel the emotions from it, but your like body's there,
Yeah.
you know? So
Mm-hmm.
you're like, okay, it's just like repetitively stand in front of that sunset, be in the woods,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely. It's why we say we do the gratitude journal, but you have to do it at least 21 days, right? Like your the neurochemistry, the signaling pathways and all of those things, like the rewiring, the neuroplasticity, that stuff takes time to change. And the first couple of days you write your gratitude journal, you're not going to feel very grateful. That's how it works. But you do need to keep going at it, and eventually, like, yeah, the wiring and the signaling will change, and you will be able to feel more gratitude, and you will be able to feel more optimistic. And it doesn't mean that just because you're optimistic, you're not going to have moments where you're not, you know, feeling good. Like I have now spent years working on happiness, and there are definitely days where I don't feel happy, and things trigger that. Giving birth was a really good cascade that like put me right back with the anxiety and the depression. And it's just the good thing I think about it this time around is that I think I came out of it a lot faster because I had all of these tools, because I understood what I was going through, and to monitor for the signs, and to know, you know, to speak to David, my husband, like before I even gave birth. I told him like, I you know, I've been through anxiety and depression, and we know giving birth and having a newborn is a very big trigger. So like pay attention to these things. Like these are my patterns. I will start doing, I knew my patterns so well of like when I started slipping, that I was able to tell him like, if I start saying these things, if I start doing this or start refusing these things, I'm starting to go down that path. And like, and it was a good conversation for us to have, because he was my support person. He was going to be the one that figured out that I was going down this path, and I needed someone to hold me, not accountable, but like just kind of be like gently guiding me, right, to that, to be like, you're going down that path, like we're starting to move in that direction, like what do you need, like how do we help you? And we had everything in place, like I had people who would help me with my mindset. I had people, like I had my, vitamin D and my like light therapy lamps and like all the things. Like I had my best friends lined up, and they knew obviously that I was going through this. And I was like, if like I'm gonna call you because I'm gonna need someone to talk me out of these things. And like it's just, I kind of forgot how we got down this path, but
No. But it's like, that's like a big part. It's like, it's not like depression doesn't happen or anxiety doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
It's like, you're like, with these tools, there's a difference between being like, okay, this is like, this is familiar. Like you're driving down the highway and then you start to like drift and you feel those rumble strips and you're like, okay, I know, keep going, I'll end up in a ditch, but I can kind of guide it back gently.
Yeah.
But being in the ditch is very different, right? Like it's very hard to get out of the ditch. You got to call roadside assistance.
Yeah. No, that's a really good analogy, actually. Yeah, it's true. It's kind of like I'm heading there. I can choose to kind of be like, oh, I know where this is going, and let myself keep going, or really take effort to be like, let's steer myself back on the path. And it came with just all the years of just being super aware of what my patterns are, and the thoughts that I have that I know are just kind of like, oh, it's just a thought and it will go away, versus like, oh, here comes a spiral, like here comes, where things are going. And I know my own thought pattern, and I know when I start overthinking, and I know when it's going to go down that path. And it was really helpful to have those things in place, set up, because you're right, like things will happen, things will trigger you. It's not like, I'm going to live my whole life not being triggered and not feeling,
like you'll, there's certain times a year that are hard, right? And you're like, okay. But I think deep, like major depressive disorder, like when I talk to patients who are dealing with that, there's a big theme is that there's a fear of like, it's never going to end. Like this is my default state. And I think for me, but also experienced depression, but I don't consider it my default state. I consider it a temporary thing. And yes, it does feel like you're like, okay, I'm doing my nature walks, I'm trying to surf, I'm trying to go to bed on time, and I don't feel happy, but I know that those things are like slowly kind of like getting me out of the ditch a little bit, and there's a trust, I think, in like, oh, I'll be joyous again. So I think it's like going through those ruts and like understanding it can allow for that to happen, like being able to like know what joy is, like, oh, I know what it feels like when I'm on the road, not in the ditch. But it's hard to kind of convey that sometimes to people, because they're like, well, going for a run's not going to fix my depression. It's like, well, no, but it's slowly engaging the resources. And
I think going like in those situations, I feel a little bit like you're using the tools that you can to set yourself up for success. If you didn't use the tool, we know it's not going to go anywhere. But if you did, you're adding a little bit of like kind of positivity back into your bucket, like just like dropping a little bit in, that gives you an opportunity. It's like a bank account, right? Like it's like, if you don't put money in there when you need to withdraw from it, where is it going to come from, right? Like you might put like $3 in a day and be like, well, this isn't making me rich, but
right,
when you need to withdraw money, like it's there, as opposed to not having put any money in there, and then where are you going to withdraw from, right? Like
that's a good analogy too. Yeah, this is a good analogy episode.
Write this down before you forget.
Your run is like a 5 cent. You're like, oh, that's nothing, but it's better than nothing. It's not actually nothing. And what were so when you came back from Bhutan and you had, so what were some of those mindset things, or what were some of the things that you started to dig into?
I started to really, I became extremely aware of my thoughts, because I don't have a specific example of what happened in Bhutan that led me to this, but I left with the impression that they they're not overthinkers.
Mm-hmm.
Like their thought process is simpler, cleaner, not as convoluted, simply because they're very aligned with what's important to them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like I don't have, like that's the impression I left with. Like that's kind of the feeling that I left Bhutan with. And since then, I have been much more aware of what my values are. Not values in the sense of like integrity and honesty, like not that kind of value, but like what's truly important to me. Like what do I really want? And it sounds like kind of, cheesy or like simple to say, but like so many of our desires are driven by what other people think of us, what we think having those things may have other people think of us, what society tells us is really important. But to be able to be like what is truly, truly important to me. And then when I start overthinking and, what I don't want to be stereotypical, but I do think women often overthink more than men. Just kind of be like what is the first of all, how to stop the overthinking, but then also like let's like zone in on like I'm stressing about this whole thing, but like at the end of the day, like what is the outcome? What is the thing that I'm wrestling with, and does it align with my values and what's important to me? And I think having that filter allows me to change my mindset and the things that I stress over and the things that I like overcomplicate. And again, it's not all rosy. Like I have a salaried position, and it means that there are things that I'm asked to do sometimes that I don't love doing, and someone at the college is going to hear this, and I am not afraid to tell them that not everything you asked me to do is something I want to do.
Yeah, I don't love all the tasks, thanks.
But, but then I kind of go, okay, well, I can sit here and stew in this, or I can say I made the choice to stay at the college because it helps me pay bills, or it helps me, it gives me a salary, it gives me, like, let's be very honest, like, yes, of course working at the college means I get a salary, which means it contributes to my income, right? And sometimes I kind of go, I love doing this and it's great, and there are things that I don't love doing, and then instead of sitting there and stewing and overthinking and going down that path, I kind of go like, look, like it's part of my task. I can choose to sit here and grumble and stew and be upset, or I have the power to be like, listen, Ellen, buckle up, get it done. It was part of one of the choices you make, which was to stay at the college and work. So this is just part of it. And I can either choose to be really upset and have to do this, or I can choose to understand that it's part of the bigger picture, and it allows me to stay employed at the college, and that feels something else in my life. And then suddenly the task is kind of like, I don't know, like, like it's not the end of the world. Like it's just like
you're not like a victim anymore. Now you're empowered. Now you're like, well, I'm choosing ultimately.
Yeah, like I kind of remind myself, like this is, yes, the college is part of my income. Yes, it helps me pay my bills. Yes, this task is part of it. I could choose not to be here, but I chose to be here, so I'm going to finish this task. And then it suddenly feels like, okay, like it's not this thing that I have to dread and complain about and do whatever. You know what I mean? Like it just suddenly makes it feel like, yeah, this task is part of something that I've chosen to do, and that it's okay. It'll end. Like I'll get it done, and then I'll move on, and then it'll be okay again. And let's face it, there's parts of running businesses and practices that there are things that I don't love doing. I like seeing patients. I love interacting with them. I don't love charting.
Yeah.
To the standard that we have to chart to. Like that's not an exciting thing, but it's I look at it and I kind of go, again, like I chose to be part of this profession. I chose to use the license, to have the license, and that came with regulations. I don't have to love them, but I can choose to accept them. I can choose to accept the fact that I am a naturopathic doctor in Ontario, and that means I have to chart, and it means I have to write these things down. Like it's just same thing for students now. I tell them that again, like nobody loves writing board exams. Who in their right mind goes, yes, let me write a board exam. This is the best thing. It's like, no one does that. You don't have to love it, but you can choose to accept it. You chose to be a naturopathic doctor. You chose to get licensed in Ontario. It means you have to write a board exam, and you can choose to accept that as part of the fact. And if you can switch to that mindset, I will bet studying is easier. I will bet studying is more enjoyable. And again, it's how you can sit there and wake up and dread studying, or you can say, I'm going to spend 3 hours learning something. And I'm going to make it enjoyable. I'm going to make myself a nice cup of coffee. I'll have some music, or I'll gather with well, that's harder during COVID, but like you can have Zoom study sessions too, right? Like there are ways you can make it enjoyable. And it's all in the mindset of like reframing it to be like, I can accept this, and I made a choice that led me here, and you can choose to accept it and make the best of it, or you can choose to hate it every step of the way. Yeah, either way, you have to write that board exam.
Right. So you're like, I'm gonna
how you want to get there.
Yeah, it's like, it reminds me of like Joseph Campbell's like walking into the dark woods. You're like, I can go willingly, knowing that I'm embarking on a journey to write NPLEX or whatever the board exam's called now. And or you can be like dragged in kicking and screaming, and like but there's a difference in our physiology between those two states. Like you have more like testosterone, like more like positive feel good chemicals when you're like willfully, courageously taking on board exams versus like, this is horrible, I hate everything. Like, I don't want,
Like it really comes down to that choice. And I think watching the people in Bhutan and how they kind of approach things, even like the snowstorms thing, you could be like, oh my God, I like planned on doing this at work today, and now I'm not, the city shut down, and I'm going to sit at home and whine and grumble that there's snow and it's cold and like whatever. Or you can be like, I'm going to go out and have fun. Like you have like
flexibility.
You have a choice. You always have a choice in terms of how you want to think about something. And even in moments of grief, I think you can say, today I'm going to choose to grieve. And that is okay. That is okay, because that's part of the process. And when you're ready, you can say, today I choose to allow a bit more sunshine into my life, and I'm going to go out for a walk and try to think about something else. Like like I really do think there's a choice. It's can we get ourselves into a state where we understand there's a choice and feel like we can make that choice.
Yeah, it's like distilling things down to like the deeper values, or seeing things for the bigger picture. Like I don't know, if I start thinking about, I don't know, overthinking about a conversation, I could start to say, well, why is this important? Obviously this is important to me. Why? And then, oh, I care about my relationships with people. I can like distill it down to my values and decide, if this is actually worth my energy, first of all. But then also, by doing that, if you start to figure out, okay, well, what is important to me is this relationship, not so much the who said what of the conversation. And so now I can actually address the problem at the root, which is like, how is my relationship with this person, and how are my relationships in general? Because maybe the relationship with this person is not that great, but maybe it needs to not be that great. Maybe we shouldn't be friends anymore. So it's helps to just get down to like a deeper thing that I think we might actually have more control over, because we can shift our mindset around that more easily, maybe. One
of the things that I like talk a lot about is overthinking, because I really do think that overthinking is like the root of a lot of our problems. I really do.
A conversation where someone's like, I think you're overthinking. I'm like, have you ever thought that maybe you are underthinking?
Classic overthinking response.
Right.
No, because nobody overthinks positive thoughts. 99% of people do not overthink. That's actually a really good point.
Yeah, I've never I'm so happy I live out. I'm happy.
Yeah. So if you're overthinking, you're probably sitting in a space of negativity. Probably. Right. I would put money on it, right? Like it's probably there. And so one of the things I always say is like, instead of asking yourself, why am I an overthinker? Or like, why do I worry? Or why do I overthink? You'll never think an answer to that, because the answer is probably not helpful. Because I'm just a worrier. or I overthink because like my mom overthink. Like it's never going to get you. Don't ask why you're an overthinker. It doesn't actually matter, to be honest. Like ask yourself what you're overthinking. Because if you can narrow down what you're overthinking, you can probably find a better solution, or at least you'll be able to identify themes of your overthinking. And if you start to realize that 5 times a day you overthink what people are thinking about you, we probably have to work on self-esteem, self-confidence, the people pleasing, like, like you can identify themes. So instead of asking yourself why you're overthinking, again, that'll never get you an answer that satisfies you or can solve the problem. Like, what am I overthinking? And if you can figure out the theme, you at least have a direction to take your next step and go from there, right? One of the analogies that I had heard, I wish I remember where I heard this from, but it was that you need in life, if you want to work on mindset, you need in life to be able to both look at your life with a microscope and with a telescope. Like you have to be able to distill down to like the nitty gritties of what's going on in your mind. What are you doing in your little things in your surroundings, and the things that you say to yourself, the little things that contribute to that bigger thing, but then also be able to pull yourself all the way out and look at it with a telescope and kind of be like, in the bigger picture, like, what is this contributing to? Does it even matter? Bigger picture, or kind of look at it like you said, like you could sit there and nitpick. He said, I said, this person said, I said, she said, blah, blah, blah. You can sit there and like worry about that. Or you can be like, well, what's the theme around this? And then like bigger picture, like, is this happening in different areas of my life? Or maybe I start to realize that in this relationship, friendship, whatever it is, I'm never happy. It doesn't, it's not adding to my life. Maybe it is a friendship that I don't need to invest as much in, or maybe it shouldn't really be a friendship, like, and so it is being able to kind of like do the nitty gritty work and like examine what your thoughts are and what's going on in your mind, but then also being able to pull into that bigger picture and being like, how is this contributing to my overall sense of well-being? And like, how do I navigate that?
I remember like, yeah, it's like to be able to zoom out, but you don't want to spend maybe like all your time there. You do want to analyze the problem at the level at which it deserves to be addressed, but it's like being able to like change that focus. Like, I remember this is really funny. I don't know if it's funny. Well, anyway, so I'm like walking down the street and I'm like worried about, I'm like thinking about nutrition and body image, and I'm in my head about that kind of thing, And then all of a sudden I have this thought and I'm like, compared to the vastness of the universe, your thighs are very insignificant in size. The difference between like two human beings that like even the biggest thighs on the earth and the small compared to the smallest compared to the universe, it's like we're comparing like, Royal Gala apples and Royal Gala apple that's slightly redder than
Sometimes we get hung up on and it's not to say like it's not important to you. It is, and if it's something that you choose to want to spend time on it or thinking about it or resolving it or working on it or whatever it is, that's fine. But you're right in that like you've got to have a good balance of that microscope versus the telescope. Like sometimes spending too much time in our little microscope is what gets us in a rut or feeling anxious, because you're sitting there overthinking all the time about the thing. And sometimes you need to step back and take a look at the bigger picture, like in the grand scheme of things, like, that 5x5 rule. Like if it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't spend more than 5 minutes on it. Like sometimes we spend so much time overthinking that like literally in 5 years, you'll be like, what? I don't even remember that happened. Like, you know what I mean? And so we get caught up sometimes, I think, in either one end or the other. And then sometimes you're right. Like if you spend too much time in the telescope things, then you just end up philosophizing about getting better, but not actually doing the work.
Right. It's like, maybe I don't need to be like obsessed with thighs. That's kind of a dumb level of analysis. Maybe like general well-being and nutrition and like energy and leg strength is a good level.
Yeah.
Because maybe the universe, like it's a helpful like way to just almost ridicule the obsession of the small minutiae. It's like, just kind of what do they call it? Like, making it like absurd. It's like highlighting the absurdity of how we focus on something really kind of dumb and insignificant for overall happiness. But maybe, nutrition is important, but then maybe because it helps with feeling happy overall and healthy. And that has nothing to do with your thighs. And then the universe doesn't care either which way at all.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also probably why they say volunteering and doing altruistic acts can help with your mood, because it's forcing you to turn your focus outward. A lot of the times when we are in that state of anxiety and in that state of feeling down and depressed, it's you're very focused on everything that's happening in your body, everything that you're feeling, everything that you're thinking, and like all the things that are going wrong or could go wrong. When you go and do an altruistic act or help someone else, suddenly you have to snap out of it, and it's about something bigger, someone else.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. That's where, like I remember reading this child's book, and she was like kind of comparing her life to her guinea pig, and she's like, she would use the guinea pig as a reference for how she was feeling about her life. And she'd be like sometimes jealous of the guinea pig when things in her life were going terribly. She'd be like, oh, the guinea pig just doesn't have to deal with this problem I'm dealing with. But then when things were going really well, she'd be like, oh, like poor guinea pig, he doesn't get to experience like whatever exciting thing I'm about to experience. Yeah. So you're like, it's just a frame of reference, but
it is.
All mindset, which is really powerful. And what are some other?
It's even like down to even motivating our patients to make changes, right? Like it's not like they're not eating well and they're not taking the supplement because they don't know it's good for them. Like everybody knows eating well is good for you. Like that is not something. It's just a matter of like using mindset to help trigger the cascade of the patient making that change on their own.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think you have to give your patients a physiological explanation of why the supplement does what it does. I definitely can, like it's part of the educational process, but like that's not necessarily going to convince them to take the supplement. Like they're not being like, oh yeah, Dr. Talia told me it adds this hormone and that, like it's not, that's not what's going to change.
Yeah.
Right. Like, even if you gave the best description and everything, like it's not really what changes people. It's the mindset of like, why is this important, and how, like how is this going to change how I feel to get me to feeling how I want to feel. And if you can kind of trigger that cascade, I think you're much more likely to see success in
like what's it gonna give me, or what pain is it gonna take away. And and it's interesting, like at the beginning of this conversation when you said that, just sort of throwing natural substances at somebody without the mindset shift, it doesn't feel congruent in like a deeper way. And it makes a lot of sense. Like I see that with sedatives, like kind of nervine herbs or more like sedative therapies for anxiety. We'll be like, oh, like I took this thing and I just felt foggy and tired. I'm like, yeah, because we're like forcing your body into relaxation, but your body knows that there's something that's perpetuating this state of hyperarousal. And it's like, if there's a tiger breathing down my neck, I shouldn't feel relaxed, so if there's something, like if you have, like a splinter in your foot, you can take painkillers, but it's helpful to remove the splinter, so there's something like almost subconscious or intuitive that people feel isn't
quite aligned.
Right. Aligned.
Those were really good analogies again.
Oh yeah, our analogy episode. Yeah. I always it's always so many analogies. Like sometimes I'm using like 3 in a sentence, and I'm like, I'm looking at my patient's face, and I'm like, too much. In this mindfulness facilitator training I took, they were like, pick one analogy and stick with it. Leaves on a stream, watching a movie theater, or whatever it is, but don't just switch back and forth. And then I'm always guilty of that. I'm like, so the leaves on the stream are going across the movie screen, and the clouds are floating by.
You've just combined them all.
Yeah, exactly. Like, watch your breath. It's kind of like clouds on a movie screen. And then they're all like, So, because, analogies are fun, but.
They are. Well, they help illustrate a point, right? But.
Yeah. Maybe let's talk about community. I know that there was something really interesting. I heard I think it was in Michelle Paris's podcast, that when you're talking about our sense of community isn't always about like the deep like soulmate relationships. And I think that's so relevant now, because I was feeling that when we first started this social distancing thing, where I'm like, I miss that, like those little casual conversations with the barista in the coffee shop, or like these people that you'd see all over the place, but like I don't know their mother's maiden name, you know? But there, it just felt like I was part of a society, you know, that then disappeared as you just get things delivered to your house. But maybe you could speak about that, if you know what I'm talking about, you know?
I do. And I think we have to remember that different people are meant to play different roles in our lives, and that's okay. It's You have different levels of connections, and they're all important. You don't it's not that only your best friend's relationship with you or your partner's relationship with you is the most important. They definitely serve a deeper level of connection, but we need both. They've actually run studies on this. I think it was in a college setting, and what they've realized is that even if one person, even if you had just casual hellos and smiles throughout the day at random people on the campus, you still felt happier at the end of the day. They didn't have to be always deep, meaningful conversations with people that you can spill your life secrets with. Like, those are obviously important and they serve a role, and they're, but the casual ones aren't to be dismissed either, because they still play a role in our overall sense of well-being and happiness. And they've measured this, right? Those people had lower cortisol levels, and they felt happier. And so, to me, I think, especially given COVID, I think we can't forget the power of a quick hello or a quick message because someone put a post up on the internet or Facebook or Instagram about something, just like a quick smile or a, hey, that was funny, or like, oh, good to see you, even if it's on here. Like we really can't forget that those are important too. I think that's like my end message is, not every relationship in your life needs to be or has to be that deep connection. And those smaller kind of casual ones where you say thanks to the barista, like that's still a form of connection, right? And you actually do need both. You do really need both in your life to balance it out and to kind of feel that happiness. Because if you think about it, just from like a practical perspective, like if you needed to have those deep, super soul searching conversations every single time, let's face it, like we don't really have time to do that all the time, every day, right? And so it is a matter, like those big, deep ones happen in bigger chunks, right, with certain people, and then you need to pepper it throughout your life, your day-to-day interactions with the people you do see on the street, and you do smile and that kind of stuff. And I do think it's as simple as like smiling at people. I don't know how many times that I have been at a Starbucks or a coffee shop where I have been so like immersed in my own thoughts or doing my own thing or on my phone or whatever, that I didn't actually look the person in the eye and say thank you when I paid them. Or like, I just, like, we're not good at that. And now, especially with masks and things, like people are like avoiding looking at each other. I'm like, smile with your eyes. Like, come on, people, like it's doable, right? Like you can smile and like make eye contact and like nod your head, or like, like it's all those little things that are important too. And when I had this conversation with Michelle, we weren't obviously in COVID, and we talked a little bit about like how people poo-poo social connections online, like like Facebook or Instagram or whatever. And I said that, like, I don't think we should poo-poo that, because it's still a form of those minor connections that we do need peppered throughout our day.
Yeah.
And for some people who are very anxious or very depressed, like getting out to make time to sit down and have coffee with someone or like have dinner with someone is really difficult. And their only form of reaching out and connecting with people and still feeling safe is through Facebook and Instagram. So why poo-poo that? Like that's what they need. That's where they are right now in their life. And I would rather they have that social connection than not having any social connection, right?
Yeah.
You can always choose what shows up on your Facebook and Instagram feed, right? Like if following that person makes you feel crappy or they anger you, unfollow them. Like it's like this people just like, I see all this stuff on my feed and I'm like, so unlike them. Like this is not like you don't have a choice. Again, you have the power of choice, right? You can choose to use social media as a positive driver in your life, or you can choose to use it as a thing that continuously feels the anger and whatever it is that you're already feeling.
Yeah.
Your
And
choice.
it's like, don't unfollow us though, everyone.
Yes, no, don't. Because we
And
should
don't
be
check
giving.
the discover option on Instagram ever.
Yeah, but it's like, you know what I mean? Like it's always a choice. And I feel like more so now than ever, yes, schedule those Zoom dinners in. Like I had one last night with a really good friend of mine. Like schedule those Zoom dinners in. Yes, do all that stuff. But I also I'm also really big on the whole productivity thing. So I try not to jump on my phone every 5 seconds because it totally ruins my train of thought and what I'm doing. And with an infant, that's also not possible. But like I do try to like schedule time every day to like kind of check out is not the right word. I was like, stalk is also not the right word. But like I'll go on and like look at someone's feed and kind of be like, oh, what have they been up to? And like comment or like just kind of maybe like something they posted piqued my interest, and I'll go look at their profile and then I'll like send them a quick message and be like, hey, it's really good to see that you're doing this. Like just the little things, I think it's still a form of connection. Like it doesn't, not everything has to be that. It's kind of like, oh, here comes another analogy. It's like you don't have to cook a humongous gourmet 7-course meal to eat healthy. You can have a fruit, you can have a healthy snack, and that's still a good thing.
You can have
right?
oatmeal
Like,
for dinner, which is
right?
what I had last night.
Well, there you go. But that's what it is. It's like you still can do those little things. Like it doesn't have to be. You don't have to run a marathon. You can go for a walk, right? Like it's balancing our relationships and our sense of community and rethinking it, kind of how we rethink exercise and eating well, right? Like I tell people to move, again, you can move however way you want to move. You don't have to sign up for running a race. Like that's not what I'm asking you to do, right? Same thing with relationships and friendships. Like you will have the ones that are the ones that you run the marathon with, and you will have the ones where you go out for a quick stroll around the block with, and that is okay. And they're both needed. It's we used to think it was the deep relationships that we only needed, but it's not true. It's actually, you do need both, and you need to find a balance of both. So the next time you see someone on the street, like make eye contact, nod your head,
Smile. Yeah, exactly.
smile. It's okay,
There,
and like,
yeah, like these little things. Like there's a woman I was past in the morning when I walk my dog on a certain route, and she always gives him a liver treat. It's like a whole ritual. She's like, "Would you like a treat?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And she like gives him half of one. I'm like, they're already small, but it's super cute because you're like, this is part of. It makes you feel like less of an island, when you're like, there's people around who I can interact, I can have an experience with. There's a give and take. We're involved in each other's lives in some way. We've participated with one another in some way. We don't need to like huddle together and talk about our divorces,
not and not everybody
always
is that person in your life, and that's, again, it's okay, but you do need the other ones. You can't neglect the other little things that happen every day. And I've actually like tried to be much better at like even at a grocery store when I'm paying for something, to like look the person in the eye and say thank you and like smile at them, or like if they're kind of like, hey, how are you, or whatever, to like make sure I ask back like, I'm doing well, like how about you, how was your day, like like, are you almost done work? Like it's like it's the small things, but like they add up to our sense of well-being and connectedness, right? Like if you, back to that bank analogy, if every little interaction was 5 cents, you could have $1 by the end of the day, right? Like it's just like, it's the little thing. We can't always wait, for like the big, huge, big things. And that's like, I hear that a lot. Like I'm so busy, like I don't have time to like have big, huge dinners with people all the time. Like, well, that's, first of all, like that's another issue like we need to work on. If you don't feel like you have ever time to sit down and have friends, like dinner with your friends, that is a problem. We need to work on that. But it's also like, it doesn't have to be those big things. It doesn't have to be like, that gourmet meal or the whatever. Like just remember that you have many opportunities throughout the day to connect with people. And it could be as simple as like, hey, just thought about you. How's it going?
Yeah.
You know, like, hope you're doing well. Like, it doesn't have, it really doesn't have to be those huge things. And that is still a sense of, it's still community.
Yeah. And it's still like online relationships, like, or online interactions are still interactions. You feel physiologically in your body sad if it's not going well, or happy if you get a nice message from someone. So it's like, why is that not real? Why do we consider that to be something, like, why are we invalidating that? It doesn't make sense. It is a real thing.
I actually think, so this made me think of something that, you know how we used to say, like, screen time is horrible for kids, right? Like, it's just like, no screen time, it's really bad for them.
Yeah.
But I mean, my daughter is 11 and a half months old, and she has screen time, because how else is she supposed to say hi to her grandparents if we're not on a video call? Like, there's actually no other possibility, right? And so, and because we wanted her to hear other people's voices other than mine and my husband's, like, the like early learning centers of Ontario has like these Zoom calls several times a day where like the early childhood educators come online and they like teach about the alphabet, or they like sing songs, and like I like try to put my iPad very far away from my child, but like she sits there because I want her to hear someone else's voice. And like like, and it's not, it blew my mind when this first happened, but like the city shut down very soon after she was born, and by the time it opened up again that we could take her out to like kind of interact with people, the first time she did it, she lost her marbles. Like, her whole worldview was me and David, and she didn't understand there were other people. Like, it never occurred to me this was going to happen. But like, we've been on walks, she saw people walk by, like it didn't occur to her, I don't think, and someone interacted with her and she screaming, red face, like inconsolable, crying. And it hit me at that moment that she didn't know any better. Like, she had no idea that other people like existed in that way. And then after I was like, no, like, yes, screen time isn't the best thing for her, but right now she needs to know other people exist. And so she has her little circle time, you know, once or twice a day. We like put it far away from her, but she like kind of understands that people are like talking to her and like waving their hands, and she like kind of follows along. And when they call out her name, she like looks, she's like, oh, someone just said Elise. Like, she is starting to recognize, and I think it's important. And so I think we at one point defined screen time to be horrible because kids were at school and like we assumed screen time meant movies and video games and all that, because that's what it was.
Right.
Now, and I'm sharing this because my chiropractor was telling me that her son is in grade 4, and obviously screen time used to be like video games and like this, like he used to love it, and now screen time is school. Screen time is how he has school. And when he's done school, he literally closes his laptop and he's like, I don't want to stare at a screen. I want to go out and play. I want to like go out. I want to play with other things. And it's just we made screen time a bad thing because it used to be like this thing that meant that they were immersed in like video gaming and like maybe watching things that we didn't want them to watch. And like, you know, now they're staring at this thing and they're not like looking out there. But now screen time to a child could be work. And now they're like, I'm done with screen time. Like, I don't want, and like, it's just how we think about screen time. Right. Yeah. And so for, there was something that you said that, like connections with people, it's the same thing. Like, we used to be like, oh, Facebook and Instagram wasn't real because you needed to be out there and you needed to go do those things. But like, that's because that was our norm. And Facebook and Instagram was a new way of connecting. It was a different way. And now, and immediately it's like, that's not the right way to do it. We have to like do this other thing that we, you know, and this is good for you. You have to go out and talk to people. You can't talk to people online. Like, that doesn't count. And now reality is it does count. And it's just our norm has shifted. Our norm used to be go out and talk to people and hang out. Therefore, talking to them online was the new thing and therefore not the good thing. Everybody go back to what you were trying to do, what you did before.
Right.
Right. And now our reality has shifted. And now because our reality has shifted, this became the norm. And I want to bet like 10 years down the road, we'll suddenly be like, oh, I guess like internet connections weren't like the end. Oh, I guess they're okay. Or like, because it wasn't the norm and people always react to it that way.
It was real. Yeah, it's real. Like, it's, if somebody's like canceled online, the pain is real. If you're shamed online, if you have a negative reaction.
It's still a thing. Like, online dating is another really good
Yeah.
example of that. Like, it used to be, oh my God, you met someone online, like, ooh, like you're supposed to go out there and do that in real life. Like, how do you know you
At a
can trust the
bar.
person and blah, blah,
Yeah.
get all that kind of stuff. And now online meeting people, dating is just a
Mhm.
fact of how people meet people
And you're like,
nowadays.
how else do you meet someone? Where else are they? They're
Yeah.
all online. Yeah.
So, but I can argue that I could pick out who was a good person to move to meeting in person based
Yeah.
on my conversations online. Like, that connection, you knew who you connected with. You knew the people who gave you like the creepy vibes that you're like,
Totally. Yeah.
and so again, like, I just feel like people often react because it isn't the norm. And it's a shift, and it's a change in paradigm, and it's a change in how we interact, and it's a change in how we do things. And therefore,
Mm.
it's not good for you. Right.
Yeah.
I
It's like
feel like,
telemedicine. It's sort of like someone was like, well, do you feel like you can connect in the same way? I'm like, well,
absolutely.
I mean, there's some things lost. Like if we're talking about physical symptoms, I can't necessarily do like a full physical exam, but there's a lot gained as well. And there's something about like when I'm talking to you, I feel like I have to when I'm like, oh, we're just talking through a screen. It feels a little
Yeah.
bit weird and like Twilight Zone, but I feel like I'm having a conversation with you. I think if we were
Mm-hmm.
sitting and having coffee, it would have the same vibe. I'm not necessarily concerned with the vehicle for a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We're having
Yeah,
conversations.
I
So
agree.
yeah, like it feels
Yeah,
like we're connecting.
I think
Unless
so.
I really like, whoa, actually it's just a screen. It's
Yeah.
all an illusion. You
Yeah.
could be anyone.
It's really like, it's the same thing. I could have this conversation with you and be fidgeting on my phone, doing whatever, and then we would still like, oh, sorry, like I could be having this conversation in person
Yeah.
and be distracted and not connect with you, or I could be focused and having that conversation with you and be connected. And to me, it's like the same thing. Like, if I'm focused and having a conversation with you online,
Mhm.
then I felt like I had a conversation with you. It's no different. Yes, there's some differences, but like, I still feel like we connected,
Mhm.
right? It's a matter of like, again, like how you're approaching it. I could have this conversation with you and be completely distracted and have 17 things open on my screen and be reading my emails, and then I would still not be connecting,
Right.
right? Like, or I could be doing that on my phone while I'm sitting in front of you as a person. It's just, how are you approaching it? If you're making space and time and your intention is to connect with that person, then you can make it happen, even if the fact that we can't see each other in
Yeah.
person right now,
Yeah.
right?
Totally. Like yeah. It's a good point. And it's like, yeah, it does feel just natural and
Mm-hmm.
totally fine. Yeah, I was doing this series on Instagram about loneliness. It was just like I didn't even know what I was going to write about, or I was just thinking about loneliness and writing different posts about it. And it all came down to it being a mindset, like it all came down to it being, you can be super lonely when you're surrounded by people, even people you love, and you can feel amazing completely alone. And you can feel like this isn't a real connection, or you could feel like it's a very meaningful, just as real connection as if we were face to face. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it is, even this idea, like in Good Will Hunting, there's a scene where Robin Williams asks Matt Damon, I don't know their character names, like, don't you feel lonely? Because Matt Damon's this like super genius, and he's like hangs out in like with people who are not. And he's like, oh yeah, I have, Nietzsche and whatever. He's like, no, like real alive people. And he's like, well, oh, like, but he's like, well, those people are alive to me. And it's like that too, like even listening to podcasts and like participating in conversations by being a listener, sometimes I feel like that's a fulfilling interaction. Like, not always, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes just like, observing people sometimes too. So it's a total mindset.
Mm-hmm. And it's, again, back to that conversation about what defines a community, and not everybody has to be your close knit
Mm-hmm.
circle, or else you don't let them in, right? Like, you can still have meaningful conversations with people that aren't the people who you share your deepest secret with, and that is okay. Like,
Yeah.
you need different levels of connection and community in your life. And I remember like this conversation, because you brought it up, that I had it with Michelle. It's just that I feel like we should not necessarily put shame on internet connections. Like, I really feel like that might, at that point, some people, that was their only possibility,
Yeah.
right, of being able to connect. And at this current state where we're in now, it is the only way most of us can connect.
Right.
So let's not like put shame on something or like guilt people for whatever works. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, if you were concerned about your eyesight, get those glasses that filter out the blue light. Like, it's,
Yeah,
there's ways.
totally.
Like, I hesitate when people get very like, it's bad for you, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
man, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's not the best, but like,
Mm-hmm.
there's probably someone benefiting from this, and let's not like make them feel bad because this is their method.
Yeah. And like, even I remember like reading a Jane Austen or like one of these sort of like I don't know, 19th century literature, and they're talking about one of the characters reads all the times was eyesight's poor, and you're like, no, we never think along those terms of like, oh, reading books is so bad for you,
Yeah.
you should hold back. Like, so it's really just the technology when it's relatively new.
Yes, that's what I think it is. Every time we have something that's kind of new, people are like, it's bad for you, don't do that. And you're like, okay, like,
Yeah.
like it's a resistance to change. I think it does come down to that. And it'd be really interesting to see like 5-6 years down the road what kids think about technology, like because they're so exposed to it now. Maybe it's not the thing they want. Maybe they literally, like my chiropractor was telling me, like, it's just, screen is not the fun thing. It's not the coveted thing that you get after you do your homework and go to school. It's not that anymore. It is school. So they're just like, no thanks. It's just how we framed it, and maybe in the future we're going to define screen time differently. Right now we define screen time as any time in front of a screen, because we assumed that, and because it was the norm, that not facing a screen was the thing, and so therefore facing the screen was now the odd thing out, and therefore you shouldn't do it. So
and they'll be
I
like,
think
this
maybe
is cool new technology. It's 3-dimensional. You can touch it. You can smell it. It's called real life. And they'll be like, I want to spend time.
So like maybe it'll be different in the future, where we now define screen time differently. Maybe screen time is not just staring at a screen. Maybe screen time actually has like, implications about what you're doing in front of that screen.
Yeah. And like, maybe, you have to like wear the right kind of pants. Like, you can't just wear leggings all day long or pajama pants. Like I'm doing right now. Yeah.
It's okay. We all are.
Yeah.
It's
like
a Zoom uniform. You're dressed on the top and not on the bottom.
I got rid of all my zippers. There's like very few zippers in my life these days. It's a big donation bag. I'm like, I'm never gonna need zipper pants again.
I'm gonna feel so different when we have to like fully get dressed to leave the house.
I know. Yeah, it's hard. Like, if I have to go and like think about what I'm wearing, and I was worried. I know we have to wrap up. I want to just give you a chance to like have last word, but I was like, it's more important to have like nice winter wear, like winter jackets, because that's all people are going to see me wearing this season. So that was like my fashion thing. I was like, a new winter jacket.
Masks. You can have fashion.
Yeah, that was the thing.
That's the newest accessory nowadays.
I know, yeah. It's like you can get masks that express your personality. I just have a box of surgical masks I ordered, so that's what I wear. Not very environmentally friendly, but they're actually probably more effective than.
Yes, they probably are. But if cloth masks is what you've got, then you go with what you got.
Yeah, and you can have puppies on yours.
I'd like to have one that I can have a rolling dial, so that if I'm like a small smile, then it's like, and then like a bigger smile, and then if somebody says something that and I have to frown, I just like roll it, and then it like flips.
Like mood masks where you're not allowed to lie. Like you'd be like, I'm happy, and it's like the mask is mad, and people are like, you can't betray your emotions anymore. We should have mood masks. Someone should invent that. Or
I was like, well, this is the thing we should think about.
Yeah. Or a mask that like you said, like can sense what your lower face is doing and mimic it.
Or at least, or like I can scroll it and make it change.
Yeah, like with a screen. Or a mask that's see-through so you can see. That'd be kind of interesting. Yeah.
Like a face shield, but half a face shield.
Right. Yeah, like a half face shield.
Yeah. Although, how would you prevent it from fogging? Because I would imagine when you talk into it, it would probably fog.
You have to have like a one-way breathing vents, like those Geox shoes or something. There's a lot of possibilities in the mask industry that we're giving ideas to.
I know. I feel like they heard it from us first.
Yeah, you've heard this first on the Good Mood podcast.
Yeah.
So you owe us some royalties.
It was our idea.
Yeah.
Don't go stealing our IP. I'm telling you now.
Exactly. All right, Ellen, so any last thoughts, any last words? And we'll have links on how people can find you and learn about Joy Avenue.
Last words. I would say overthinking is the cause of a lot of our problem.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, yeah, I would say that it's probably the biggest cause of a lot of our problems. And if you are somebody who's overthinking, ask yourself what you're overthinking, not why you're an overthinker.
Mm-hmm.
And once you ask yourself what you're overthinking and you find that pattern, then find a solution to that pattern, and you will probably stop your overthinking, which then automatically increases your mood. Because like I said before, nobody overthinks positive thoughts. So chances are you're sitting in a bit of a cloud of negativity. And if you really want to experience that feeling of happiness, contentness, joy, well-being, and enjoy the success that you're, working hard to build, then start working on what you're thinking. And that will be the thing that triggers the cascade that makes the shift in your mood and how you're feeling.
It's beautiful. And when in doubt, have a snowball fight.
Yes.
Thank you, Ellen, for joining. This is so great.
Thanks for having me. It was really good connecting with you.
Yes, I know, via our screens. Yeah.